Remember when this was all you saw on the news? Last year, millions of people around the world took to the streets for issues ranging from climate change to human rights to equality.
2019 has been called the year of the street protest. Lebanon, Middle East, Chile, America, Hong Kong. Protesters in Sudan were able to get rid of a dictator for 30 years, Omar al-Bashir. People of all walks of society taking to the streets and demanding positive change in their countries.
Protests were such a big story last year that we at DW News even had a whole series planned about them.
We want to tell the stories of people whose actions might change their countries forever.
Then came the coronavirus, and over 2 billion people around the world are under lockdown.
Empty restaurant chairs, a common sight now in Italy.
Tourists who visit Beijing usually come to spend time here. Today, I'm the only one.
Stalls have been removed, no activity whatsoever.
The army and security forces have been called in to enforce a lockdown.
Even I'm doing this in my living room.
The point of Fridays for Future is to demonstrate on the streets, to protest. Quite challenging to continue striking and organizing if the people cannot meet physically.
When the tents and the squares are demolished by the security force, this is obviously a big demoralizing factor. Lots of people were extremely upset about it. They felt that it was all for nothing.
But the grievances that brought people out on the streets in the first place have not been resolved, and in some cases have gotten even worse.
The socioeconomic indicators that people have been worried about back in the fall are far worse right now. Poverty, unemployment, food prices have skyrocketed.
People are going to notice that the climate crisis isn't going away, so I think we are going to be much bigger after the corona crisis.
So will these movements survive the pandemic? And what are protesters doing in the meantime? Some are finding alternative ways to make their voices heard. In Brazil, millions recently banged their pots from balconies to protest President Bolsonaro's response to the COVID-19 crisis. It was the biggest protest against his government to date. And in Poland, women lined the streets while social distancing to protest a bill they say would tighten abortion restrictions even further. Other movements are going digital to continue raising public awareness about their causes. At its height, the Fridays for Future climate movement was able to mobilize millions around the world. Now Greta Thunberg, who inspired the weekly school skipping protest, is urging her followers to take it online, with hashtags like Climate Strike Online and Digital Climate Strike.
We are still skipping school on a Friday. We are, if school is at all possible, and we are also trying to give our demands to the people who are actually making decisions. It's not the same as being on the streets because we aren't able to connect as well to the people who are not protesting with us.
It's an open question whether these virtual protests will be as effective as the ones that took place on the streets. But some activists have been successful at keeping their causes on the radars of policymakers. One example is a protest organized by a group here in Germany that is fighting for asylum rights. They had a virtual march in Berlin that targeted different institutions like the Interior Ministry with concentrated tweets, videos, emails, and phone calls.
We were #1 trending tweet in all Germany during the demonstration with hashtag Leave No One Behind. We even passed COVID-19 for that matter, but then again we have to see what the outcomes are, how politics will react on the pressure that we try to create.
Alternative forms of protests are not the only tactic protesters are using to stay relevant and survive the lockdown. Some are evolving and repurposing skills they gained from mobilizing people. Around the world, protest movements have been using their networks to help fight COVID-19 and alleviate the effects of economic turmoil. In Lebanon, protesters that for months took to the streets to demonstrate against corruption have traded their flags and banners for disinfectants and supplies of food.
Some people have taken that momentum and continued to organize and to try to serve the community, especially at a time where the government isn't, because of its socioeconomic restrictions and austerity measures. Charity groups have just changed their strategy to appease the needs of the people now in light of this crisis.
In Hong Kong, these two activists used this space to make props for demonstrations. Following the COVID-19 outbreak, they used it to make hand sanitizers that can help curb the spread of the virus. Prominent activists like Joshua Wong say initiatives like this help them stay in the public eye and keep getting their message out.
The solidarity and unity, we hope to keep the protest momentum even we can't gather on street. Our activist group, including Demosisto, imported more than 1.3 million surgical masks to Hong Kong, coordinated with lots pro-democracy entrepreneur to set up factory in Hong Kong to produce masks, and let those Hong Kongers realize that democracy groups can also help them when we are under such global health crisis.
Activists also say they're seeing a worrying trend in the way some governments are dealing with COVID-19. And there are fears the crisis may be exacerbating the factors that led protesters to the streets in the first place, like inequality, corruption, and government overreach. In Hungary, Prime Minister Orban has been accused of using COVID-19 to further tighten his iron grip on power. Across major economies, ranging from India to the US, millions are now suddenly unemployed, often with little security to fall back on. And in Lebanon, years of mismanagement mean the economic fallout for COVID-19 is hitting the most marginalized hardest.
Socioeconomic rights has become a greater subject of discussion. They look to countries that have, compensated workers that could not work anymore, that have exempted rent, have even abolished some utility payments for several months, and they're sort of flabbergasted that not much is being done here. There has been some minimal efforts here and there, but it's nowhere near sufficient.
But some say disappointment like these could even offer an opportunity for the protest movements to shape what happens once this crisis is over.
There's been a really interesting energy around the idea that actually this virus, this moment, this pandemic is a reason to take pause and reevaluate the injustices that exist in our society and think about how the recovery programs, the way in which we reconstruct and reopen our countries once these lockdowns are over presents an opportunity for transformative social change. And these movements certainly have a role and a voice in making that as effective as possible, but also something that serves the needs of the most vulnerable.